The dining hall of the starbound Unity was always noisy during the evening meal. 20 different alien species ate together, their voices mixing into a loud buzz of different languages. At one table, the Scalorth warriors shared stories of their battles. Their thick, scaled skin showed old scars like medals. At another table, the insect-like hive drones clicked their sharp teeth while eating raw meat. But in the corner, sitting alone with a small bowl of vegetable soup, Taeho Kim Tae-Ho was human, but he looked nothing like the humans in the war stories that filled the ship's database. He was thin and quiet, with gentle eyes behind wire glasses. His black hair was always neat, and his hands were soft from working with plants instead of weapons. While other crew members wore battle armor or showed off their strength, Taeho wore a simple green uniform with dirt stains from his work in the plant lab. "Look at him," growled Crix, the biggest Scalorth warrior on the ship. His yellow eyes stared at Taeho with disgust. How did such a weak thing come from the same planet as the great human warriors? The other aliens at Crix's table turned to look. There was Yule, the hive drone commander, whose sharp claws could cut through steel. A rock-like. Granite, whose skin could stop laser blasts. They all shook their heads as they watched Taeho eat his soup. "I heard he has never even held a weapon," said Yule, her voice making a buzzing sound. "Not once in his whole life." "And yesterday," added Borth in his deep, grinding voice, "I saw him crying over a dead plant. A plant. Can you believe it?" All laughed, but it was not a kind laugh. Taeho heard them talking about him. He always did. But he did not look up from his soup. He had learned long ago that arguing would not change their minds. Instead, he finished eating and walked quietly out of the dining hall. The hallways of the starbound Unity were long and silver, lit by blue lights that never went out. Taeho walked slowly, nodding hello to crew members who passed by. Most of them ignored him. Few gave him looks of pity, as if he was sick or broken. Only one person smiled back at him. Dr. So-Young Lee was the ship's mind doctor. She studied how different species thought and felt. She was also human, but unlike Taeho, she was respected by the crew. Her work helping soldiers deal with battle stress was important. Everyone knew it. "Hello, Taeho," she said as they passed in the hallway. "How are your plants doing?" "Very well, thank you," Taeho replied with a small smile. "The Andromedan moss is finally growing roots in earth soil. It took 3 months, but I think we found the right mix." So-Young nodded, but Taeho could see. She was in a hurry. She had important work to do. He did not blame her for walking away quickly. Everyone on the ship had important work except him. It seemed Tae-Ho reached his lab and pressed his hand on the door scanner. The metal door slid, open with a soft hiss. Inside, the air was warm and wet, filled with the smell of growing things. Hundreds of plants from dozens of worlds grew under special lights. Some had flowers that glowed in the dark. Others had leaves that changed color when touched. A few made soft music when the wind blew through them. This was Taeho's world. Here, surrounded by living things that did not judge him or call him weak, he felt at peace. He walked to his desk and picked up his daily report. Every day he wrote down which plants were growing well, which ones were sick, and what they might need. The ship's computer would file his report away. But Taeho wondered if anyone ever read them. His work was supposed to help the crew understand. New worlds they visited. They knew which plants were safe to eat or touch. It could save lives. But most crew members thought his job was useless. They believed that strength and weapons were all they needed to survive in space. As Taeho watered, a small blue flower from the Centauri system, the ship's communication system, crackled to life. "Attention, all crew," came the voice of Captain Dongsu Park. The captain was a famous human warrior who had fought in the Outer Rim Wars. His voice was strong and serious, the kind of voice that made people listen. "We have reached the 4th planet in the Omega-7 system. Prepare for surface scanning." Taeho looked up from his plants. For the past week, the ship had been investigating strange reports from this part of space. 3 different worlds had been found completely empty of life. Not just empty of intelligent life, but empty of everything. No plants, no animals, no bacteria, nothing. it was impossible according to science. Life found a way to exist almost everywhere. Even on worlds with poisonous air or deadly radiation, something usually lived. But these 3 worlds were totally dead. As if something had carefully removed every living thing, the crew was nervous about it. Even the bravest warriors seemed worried. They talked in quiet voices about what kind of creature could kill entire worlds. The ship's weapons expert, Jin Woo Lee, had been checking the defense systems twice a day, but Taeho felt something different when he heard the reports. Where others saw destruction, he saw something else. The dead worlds were not destroyed by bombs or poison. They were clean, as if each living thing had been carefully taken away. It reminded him of how a gardener might remove weeds from a garden, leaving the soil perfect for new plants. The idea made him curious, not afraid. "Beginning surface scan now," announced the ship's navigator, Hyjin Park. "All department heads report to the bridge." Taeho was not a department head. Nobody would ask for his opinion about what they found. But he pulled up the scanning data. On his computer, anyway. As the information came in, his eyes grew wide. The 4th planet was just like the others. No life anywhere. But there was something else. Something the others might miss. The soil was rich and perfect. The water was clean. The air was pure. This was not a world that had been destroyed. This was a world that had been ... prepared. Taeho's hands moved quickly over his keyboard, pulling up more data. He compared the soil samples from all 4 dead worlds. They were all the same. Perfect conditions for life, but no life anywhere. His heart began to beat faster. This was not random destruction. This was purposeful, intelligent. And if he was right about what he was seeing, then whatever had done this was still out there, still watching, still deciding which worlds deserved to live, and which ones deserved to die. As Taeho stared at his screen, he had no idea that he was about to meet the being responsible. He had no idea that his gentle nature, the very thing that made others call him weak, would soon make him the most important person on the ship. He only knew that something was coming, and somehow he was not afraid. The starbound Unity shook violently, throwing Taeho against the wall of his plant lab. Glass containers crashed to the floor, spilling water and soil everywhere. The lights went out for a moment, then came back on with a red glow that meant emergency. "All crew to battle stations," Captain Dong-Soo Park's voice boomed through the ship's speakers. "We are under attack." But Taeho knew this was not an attack. As he picked himself up from the floor, he could feel something different in the air. The ship's engines had stopped completely. Not broken or damaged, but simply turned off. Everything was quiet except for the sound of his own breathing. In the hallways, crew members ran past his door. He could hear Crix shouting orders to his Scalorth warriors. The insect-like hive drones were making their battle cry, a high screaming sound that hurt his ears. Everyone was afraid. Taeho walked to his door and looked out. The hallway was full of running aliens, all carrying weapons, but none of them knew what they were fighting. The ship's sensors were not working. The computer showed nothing. It was as if something had simply reached out and turned off their technology. "Taeho." Dr. So-Young Lee grabbed his arm as she ran past. "Come to the safe room now." "What happened?" he asked. "We don't know," she said, pulling him along. "Something big just appeared next to our ship. The captain says it's impossible. Nothing that large should be able to move so fast." They reached the main hallway where most of the crew had gathered. Captain Park stood in the center, trying to look calm, but Taeho could see fear in his eyes. The captain had fought in many wars and seen terrible things, but this was different. Port. The captain shouted to his officers. Navigator Hyjin Park looked at her broken instruments. "Sir, our engines are completely dead, not damaged, just ... off, like someone threw a switch." "Weapons?" asked the captain. Security Chief Jin Woo Lee shook his head. "Nothing works, sir. It's like our whole ship is frozen." "Sir," came a voice from the communication station. It was Misun Jung, the ship's communication officer. Her face was white with fear. "Something is trying to dock with us." Everyone turned to look at the main screen. It showed the outside of their ship, but what they saw made no sense. Something huge and dark was attached to their hull. It looked like a living shadow, but it was solid enough to connect with their docking port. "How big is it?" whispered someone. "The sensors are not working," said Hyjin, "but from what I can see, what? It's at least as big as our ship, maybe bigger." The crew stood in silence, staring at the screen. Even the bravest warrior seemed small and helpless. Crix, who was never afraid of anything, was shaking. The hive drones had stopped their screaming and were making quiet clicking sounds like scared insects. Then they heard it. A sound like metal being torn apart, but gentle, like someone carefully opening a door. Whatever was outside was coming inside. Everyone behind me ordered Captain Park, raising his weapon, but his hands were shaking too. The sound grew louder, then it stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. The crew waited, barely breathing. Some of them were praying to their gods. Others were crying quietly. Then the air in the hallway began to change. It became thick and heavy, like the air before a storm. A feeling of power filled the space, so strong that it made everyone want to run and hide. "It's here," whispered Dr. Lee. The end of the hallway began to glow with a strange light. The light grew brighter and brighter until they had to cover their eyes. When the light faded, something was standing there. Taeho had studied many different forms of life, but he had never seen anything like this. The being was tall, taller than any crew member. Its body seemed to be made of both solid matter and energy at the same time. Sometimes it looked like a person-shaped shadow, and sometimes it looked like a star walking on two legs. But what made everyone freeze with terror was not how it looked, it was how it felt. Just being near this creature made every instinct scream danger. It was like standing next to a black hole or a nuclear bomb. This was a being that could destroy worlds, and everyone knew it. The alien warriors, who had never been afraid of anything, fell to their knees. Some of them were shaking so hard they could not stand. Others had fainted from fear. Even Captain Park, the great war hero, could not move. But Taeho felt something different. Yes, he could feel the creature's power. It was like standing in front of an ocean or a mountain, something so big and strong that it made him feel very small. But he was not paralyzed by fear like the others. Instead, he felt curious. The being's head turned toward him. Taeho could not see its face clearly, but he knew it was looking at him. Everyone else in the hallway was either frozen in terror or had collapsed completely. Only Taeho was still standing upright. Then the creature spoke. Its voice did not come through the air like normal voices. Instead, it spoke directly into their minds, and every person heard it in their own language. "I am Vexhai," the voice said. It was neither male nor female, but something beyond such simple ideas. "I have come to judge." The word judge made everyone even more afraid. Judge what? Judge whom? And what would happen to those who failed the judgment? But Vexhai was not looking at the others anymore. Its attention was focused completely on Taeho, who was still standing there with wide, curious eyes. "Interesting," Vexhai said, and this time the voice seemed to speak only to Taeho. "You do not flee, you do not attack, you do not beg. What? Are you, small one?" Taeho knew he should be terrified. This being could probably destroy their entire ship with a thought. But instead of fear, he felt the same feeling he got when he discovered a new type of plant or figured out how to help a sick alien creature. He felt wonder. "I am Taeho Kim," he said quietly. His voice was steady, even though his heart was beating very fast. "I take care of plants." Some of the crew members who were still conscious looked at him like he was crazy. How could he be so calm? How could he speak to this terrible being like it was a normal conversation? But Vexhai seemed pleased by his answer. "You take care of things," Vexhai repeated. "You do not take life. You give life." "Yes," said Taeho. "That is what I try to do." Vexhai moved closer, and the feeling of power grew stronger. Some crew members whimpered in fear, but Taeho did not step back. He looked up at the being with the same gentle curiosity he showed to everything in his plant lab. "I have traveled for many ages," Vexhai said. "I have seen countless species across the stars, Most react to my presence with fear or anger. They try to fight me or they try to run away. But you look at me like I am something to be understood, not feared. Everything deserves to be understood, Teho said simply. Even things that are scary are different. For the first time since it appeared, Vexai was silent. It studied Teho for a long moment, as if seeing something it had never seen before. Tell me, small gardener, Vexai finally said. What do you think I am? Teho thought carefully before answering. He remembered the dead worlds, the perfect soil, the clean air. He thought about how this being had not hurt anyone yet, even though it clearly could. I think, Teho said slowly, you are someone who takes care of things too, just ... in a different way than I do. The silence that followed was so complete that everyone could hear their own heartbeats. Even the ship's computers seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then, for the first time in eons, Vexai smiled. Vexai's smile was not like a human smile. It was more like watching a star being born, beautiful and terrible at the same time. The crew members who saw it felt their fear grow even stronger. But Teho felt something warm in his chest, like when he helped a dying plant come back to life. You see, truly, small gardener, Vexai said, I am indeed a caretaker, though my garden is much larger than yours. How large? Asked Teho, stepping closer. Behind him, he heard Dr. So-Young Lee whisper his name in warning, but he did not stop. My garden is the universe itself, Vexai replied. For countless ages, I have traveled between the stars. I watch how life grows and spreads. Most of the time, life is beautiful and should be protected, but sometimes, ... Vexai paused, and the air around them grew darker. Sometimes a species becomes like a disease. They destroy everything around them. They kill other life forms for no reason, and they poison their own worlds, and then spread to poison others. When this happens, I must remove them, like pulling weeds. From a garden, Teho nodded slowly. He understood this. In his plant lab, he sometimes had to remove sick plants to save the healthy ones. It was sad, but necessary. The 3 worlds we found, Teho said. You removed the life there because it was sick? Yes, said Vexai. Each of those worlds had a species that was destroying everything else. They would have spread to other worlds and killed more life. So I removed them and cleaned the worlds, making them ready for new life to grow. Captain Park finally found his voice. You destroyed entire civilizations. Vexai turned to look at the captain, and Park immediately fell silent again. The being's power was too overwhelming. I do not destroy, Vexai said calmly. Transplant. The species I remove are given new forms, new chances to grow in better ways. Death is not the end, Captain. It is just another kind of change. But how do you decide? Asked Teho. How do you know which species should live and which should be ... transplanted? This question seemed to please Vexai very much. Small gardener is the most important question of all. I watch how species treat other life. Do they help or do they hurt? Do they create or do they only destroy? Do they show kindness to those who are weaker? Vexai moved closer to Teho, and now they were only a few steps apart. The other crew members pressed themselves against the walls, trying to get as far away as possible. Most species, when they meet me, show me their worst nature, Vexai continued. They attack because they are afraid. Or they beg and make promises they do not mean. Or they try to trick me with lies. But you, Teho Kim, you show me something I have rarely seen. What is that? Teho asked. Genuine curiosity without fear, respect without worship. You see me as I truly am, not a monster or a god, but simply another being trying to do what is right. In all my travels, I have met only a few beings like you. Dr. So-Young Lee watched from the wall where she was pressed against the metal. She began to understand something amazing. Teho was not being brave in the way that warriors were brave. He was not fighting his fear or trying to hide it. He simply was not afraid. This being that terrified everyone else was just another interesting creature to him. Vexai said, and hearing him use the being's name made several crew members gasp. What will you do with us? With our ship. That depends, Vexhai said, on what I learn about your species. Tell me, do humans help other life, or do they hurt it? Teho thought about this question seriously. He knew that humans could be violent. There had been many wars. But he also knew about human doctors who saved lives, and teachers who helped. Others learn, and people like himself who took care of growing things. Humans can be both, he said honestly. Some hurt and some help. Most of us try to do what we think is right, but we do not always know what that is. An honest answer, said Vexhai approvingly. And what about you, Teho Kim? In your life, have you helped or have you hurt? I try to help, Teho said simply. Take care of plants from many different worlds. I help them grow together, even when they are very different from each other. Sometimes I make mistakes, but I always try to learn and do better. Vexhai was quiet for a long time, studying Teho with eyes that seemed to see into his soul. Finally, the being spoke again. In all my ages of existence, I have never met a being quite like you. You have power, but you use it gently. You have knowledge, but you remain humble. Face the unknown with wonder instead of fear. These are the qualities of a true caretaker. I do not have power, Teho said, confused. I am the weakest person on this ship. No, said Vexhai firmly. You have the greatest power of all. You have the power to nurture life and bring different beings together in peace. Your crewmates see physical strength as power, but they are wrong. True power is the ability to create and protect, not to destroy. Vexhai stepped back and seemed to grow even larger until its presence filled the entire hallway.
Ow.
When it spoke again, its voice was formal and serious. Teho Kim of Earth, I offer you something that I have never offered to any being in the universe. I offer you the bond of blood, brother. The crew members who heard this did not understand what it meant, but they could tell it was important. Even in their terror, they sensed that something historic was happening. What does that mean? Asked Teho. It means that despite the vast difference in our abilities, I recognize you as my equal. It's not in power, but in purpose. We are both gardeners of life, you in your small lab and I across the cosmos. A blood-brother bond means we will always be connected, always able to help each other, always friends across any distance. Teho's eyes grew wide. You want to be my friend? For the first time, Vexhai seemed surprised. Friend, yes, I suppose. That is the simple way to say it. But it is more than friendship. It is a recognition that we share the same heart, the same desire to help life flourish. I would be honored, Teho said, and he meant it. What happened next would be talked about. In the crew's stories for the rest of their lives, Vexhai raised one hand, and suddenly the air around them began to shine with soft, warm light. The light was not bright enough to hurt their eyes, but it filled everyone with a feeling of peace and wonder. The ritual is simple, Vexhai explained. I will share a small part of my awareness with you, so that you can see the universe as I see it. And you will share your perspective with me, so that I can remember what it feels like to find joy in small, growing things. Teho nodded and held out his hand. When Vexhai touched it, the light grew brighter, and suddenly, everyone in the hallway could feel something amazing happening. It was as if a door had opened in their minds, showing them how big and beautiful the universe really was. They could sense millions of worlds with billions of different life forms, all connected in a vast web of existence. They felt Vexhai's deep love for all living things, and his sadness when he had to remove species that had become destructive. But most amazing of all, they could feel Teho's perspective mixing with Vexhai's cosmic awareness. They felt his gentle joy in helping plants grow, his patience with difficult crew members, his quiet happiness when different species learned to work together. The ritual lasted only a few minutes, but when it was over, everything had changed. Teho looked the same as before, still thin and quiet with his neat hair and gentle eyes. But now, there was something different about him, a sense of deep peace and wisdom that made everyone want to be near him. It is done, said Vexhai. You are my blood brother, Teho Kim. No matter where I travel in the universe, I will know how you are, and you will know how I am. If you ever need my help, You need only call my name, and I will come. And if you need my help, ask Taeho. Smile was warm now, not terrible. Perhaps someday I will. The universe is full of surprises. As Vexai prepared to leave, the crew began to see Taeho in a completely new way. Captain Park was the first to step forward. Taeho, he said, his voice full of respect, I owe you an apology. We all do. We thought you were weak because you were gentle. But you just saved all our lives by being exactly who you are. Engineer Wu Zhenchoi nodded in agreement. I have been thinking about what Vexai said. True strength is not about fighting or destroying. It is about building and protecting and helping things grow. Dr. So-Young Lee smiled at Taeho with tears in her eyes. I always knew you were special, but I never understood how special until today. You have a kind of courage that none of us have. You face the unknown with love instead of fear. Even Crix, the big Scalath warrior who had always mocked Taeho, came forward. His scaled face was humble as he spoke. Human Taeho, he said formally, I have been a fool. I thought strength meant having big muscles and sharp claws. But you faced the most dangerous being in the universe with nothing but kindness, and you won its friendship. That is true warrior spirit. Vexai watched all of this with approval. Before leaving, it spoke to the entire crew. Remember what you have learned today, the being said? Your species has great potential, but only if you learn to value wisdom. Over warfare, creation, over destruction, love, over fear. Follow the example of your blood brother. He will show you the way. Then Vexai was gone, disappearing as suddenly as it had arrived. The ship's power came back on, and everything returned to normal. But the crew was never the same. From that day forward, Taeho was treated with the respect he deserved. But more importantly, the entire crew began to change how they thought about strength and courage. They started working together better, helping each other instead of competing. They began to see their mission not as conquering space, but as learning from it and protecting it. Taeho went back to his plant lab, but now crew members often came to visit him. They wanted to learn about the plants from different worlds. They wanted to understand how different life forms could live together in harmony. They wanted to be more like him. Navigator Hudgen Park started a garden in her quarters, growing flowers from her home world alongside plants that Taeho had given her. Security Chief Jinwoo Lee began studying peaceful ways to solve conflicts instead of just preparing for battles. Even the alien crew members started treating each other with more kindness and respect. The story of Taeho and Vexai spread throughout the galaxy. Other ships heard about the human who became blood brother to an apex predator through gentleness. Instead of violence, species that had been enemies for centuries began to wonder if there might be a better way to resolve their differences. Taeho continued his quiet work, taking care of his plants and helping his crewmates understand the value of all life. He had not changed who he was. He was still gentle, still patient, still more interested in growing things than fighting. But now everyone understood that these qualities were not weaknesses. They were the greatest strengths in the universe. Sometimes late at night in his lab, Taeho would feel a warm presence in his mind. It was Vexai, somewhere far across the galaxy, letting him know that he was well and continuing his work as the universe's gardener. And Taeho would send back his own feelings of peace and happiness, reminding his blood brother that even in the vastness of space, small acts of kindness could change everything. The starbound unity continued its mission with a new understanding of what it meant to be strong. They had learned that the greatest power was not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to know when not to use that power. And they had learned it from the gentlest person among them, who had been strong all along.